What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Social Standard podcast. I've got a very interesting guest today. So we have Dustin Hinz, and he has got a career path leading up to his current role as CMO of Firestone Walker Brewing Company that I think is very telling of the direction that we're seeing marketing go overall. So I'm excited to dig into that. But before we do that, Dustin, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me, Jess.
Yeah. And you're coming to us live today from the wonderful city of Venice. Is that right?
Yeah, Venice Beach. I apologize in advance for the ambulances and helicopters and crazy people on the street.
That's all the character that comes with Venice. So, and you got the surfboard in the background. So I think it's all fair game. Well, I will tell you, one of the interesting things that I always think about with Firestone is that after I had my first baby, my partner cracked open a beer, and it happened to just be a Firestone beer. It was a Union Jack. So I always have a positive view on Firestone, and I used to live in Venice, down near the kind of restaurant and brewery that you guys have, kind of on the MDR Venice line there. So it has been a part of, I think, my life for a while, and I know 805 is doing some really great things too. So I'm excited to talk to you a little bit more about this stuff today. And I think, like I said, I think we're gonna have a really interesting conversation. So would you be cool if I gave a little background for our audience? Because I think your background's pretty important to this whole conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I never mind anybody talking about me, so go for
it. Always easier to do it that way. Well, what I would say is just based on, our conversations and what I've read about you, you've made a really big name for yourself in the creative world. And just for our audience to kind of understand the full sort of scope of Dustin here, if you look back at his history, I mean, he was at Guitar Center for 17 years, made his way up to be the VP of Brand Experience and Entertainment Marketing. Then he went on to become the EVP of Marketing at Ernie Ball Music Man, only to then launch your own production company, which is 5FT17. And that brings us to today, where you're the CMO of Firestone Walker Brewing Company. So we spent a lot of time in the music industry, and then that has transitioned you into the beer industry, which is a pretty interesting jump. But I actually think makes a lot of sense from like a passion and culture moment. But tell me, I guess, a little bit about your approach to marketing, because based on what I've seen, you've done a tremendous amount in the content marketing world. It's not just all standard ad, print, TV spot, sort of, I don't want to say basic marketing, but sort of basic marketing. You've had a very interesting, heavy-handed approach in the content space. So give us your perspective on what marketing really means and how you like to engage with your customers.
Yeah, good question. It was really born out of the need to be a storyteller. I got really, really lucky in my career in the hard work, right time, right opportunity. From the moment I got my first guitar when I was 14, that was really all I wanted to do. Like, college wasn't on the agenda. It was, oriented in making music professionally. And I was lucky enough to start in the mailroom at Guitar Center, 1997. Like that telltale story of, starting in the mailroom and working your way to the top and having great mentors. And so, my career in marketing really got started as I was in a business that I was passionate about. I was the consumer, and I would talk to the marketing guys. As a 17-year-old kid popping into the marketing offices and, just saying, hey, I think we could, what if we were working with artists and we were talking to guys like me like this would make me want to buy a guitar or would want to make me buy more gear. And my career in marketing really began that way as a storyteller. And luckily, I sort of had a knack for that. And then I had great mentors along the way that taught me a lot of the traditional ones and zeros of marketing, great agency partners. And so, from all the spots and dots that you needed to do to drive engagement, make sure that media got in front of people, how that media was working. But most importantly, the thing that I was always excited by and still am to this day, and it's one of the perks of the job, is, taking a lot of these young, really talented people under my wing and kind of teaching them the same thing, is understanding what you stand for and understanding how you can connect your brand with consumers in a way that means something to them. Because at the end of the day, that's what consumers are buying. They're buying brands, not products. And if your brand doesn't stand out in a sea of sameness, then you really don't have much of a chance. So it started there, and we found the way to entangle the brands. I've been very, very lucky to work for 3 iconic California brands. As a storyteller, that's It's not as easy to do that if you're marketing, pharmaceuticals or widgets.
Sure.
So a good brand, great storytelling, and then, really good marketing strategy. Make sure that, we develop messages that resonate and ultimately drive the business metrics that are necessary to get more money to do more cool ideas.
That's amazing. So how old were you when you started the mailroom?
17.
That's
just
awesome.
turned 17. Yeah. I lived in Australia when I was a kid, so
Okay.
the school season's a little further ahead there. So when I got back, I had just graduated. I had no idea what I was going to do. I had no plan other than music. And I was, lucky that I found another creative medium in marketing that allowed me to, flex a lot of those muscles that were really important to me.
That's super interesting, and I actually just wrote a piece on education, and I think how, we're an influencer company, so everything's going to come through an influencer angle. But I just wrote a whole piece on education about how I think college no longer prepares marketers for the real world. And I think that people are actually better to skip and do something exactly like what you did, because the tools that are out there now to do things. It's interesting because you say, hey, I was a 17-year-old kid. I go into the marketing seniors' offices and talk to them about this stuff. That same thing's going on now, but it is instead of them maybe talking about marketing, a lot of them are talking about social media and digital content and how to do it, right? And a lot of the more senior folks have to listen to these, I call them kids lightly, but these young professionals, because they are the ones that understand how to sell to the current generation, much like you did. So yeah, I always love the parallels.
It's a creator's economy nowadays. And
that's right.
The stuff that, you see kids doing on Instagram today or TikTok is light. You used to have to pay a guy, thousands of dollars with a giant video camera to come out and do that stuff back when we were cutting our teeth. So it's really inspiring to see some of the work that people are doing, and they've found a way to create careers out of it. So I think it's pushing the entire industry in the right direction, which is ultimately storytelling. So
it is.
There's always going to be the right people around you to learn the science of the business, and that's just pretty easy to pick up. And it's always changing. There's always going to be new ways to measure what's effective, especially with the type of business that you're in. The music business, the retail business that I was in first, which was music, and then global supplier, product development, and then now beer. Each of those industries is a completely different set of KPIs and metrics that would drive success. But at the end of the day, storytelling is sort of the same no matter what type of business that you're working in.
Yeah, exactly. And how did you sort of find your way into the production and the storytelling side of things? Because that's a very specific skill set.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We're a buddy of mine is still the creative director over at Guitar Center, and we just had coffee the other day, and he was my creative director when I was there, and however many years ago now, 7 or 8 years ago, and we were talking the other day about just kind of reminiscing about the just sheer quantity of stuff that we had done. And it really started, I don't even remember the year, but it was the year YouTube came out, or right around there, because I remember we were doing something with Slash from Guns N' Roses, and I was like, hey, we should film this, because it was really just this event for 300-400 people. It was really exclusive. And I said, hey, we should film this thing. And there's this new thing called YouTube that just came out. We should record it and put it on YouTube. And it kind of started there. And we had this idea. It was called Guitar Center Sessions, which was this idea about just taking great artists and unpacking their stories, because in the music business, it's a business of hero worship, and you play guitar because there's a hero that inspired you. You have pictures on the wall of them. And it started there. And then, over a couple of years, we did some of these. And then I bumped into a buddy of mine that worked at a management company. And he's like, hey, this should be a TV show. And we made the rounds. And we pitched that thing to everybody. DirecTV and MTV. I remember inadvertently insulting the guys at MTV because I shit on reality television. I was like, MTV should be about music. And they're like, listen, kid, this thing's making us a ton of money. I learned a lot really early on about all the wrong things to do.
Sure.
But I bumped into these guys at DirecTV, and they were really passionate about music, and they, I did not expect them to say yes, but I sat down, pitched them the show. They said, we'll take 20 episodes, and I had no idea what I was doing. And we went to work. And again, if there's a lesson in all of this stuff, it's what I tell everybody is surround yourself with really smart people.
Yes.
I got the best, because I was working at Guitar Center, we had resources, and I got the best entertainment attorney, and I got, to teach me about mechanical rights and intellectual property and all the things that we needed to do. And we launched the show. It ended up becoming one of the biggest music shows on TV, globally broadcasted. It did 102 episodes of it. That's turned into documentaries and web series and radio shows. And at the end of the day, the idea of being a vehicle for artists to expose their music to the masses, and then ultimately, in return, brand Guitar Center became this really nice model that worked really well. It was effective for the artists, it was effective for us, and it inspired people. And that kind of became the mechanism that everything was born out of at Guitar Center for, almost 17 years.
I mean, at the time, were any of your competitors doing anything like this at Guitar Center?
No, and they still don't, which is crazy. I think what was really interesting about the music space, and I mean, I think I left Guitar Center in 2015, so it wasn't that long ago. And most industries, the brands drive the category. You think about basketball, like Nike's going to do the best brand work in the world, and all Foot Locker needs to do is just make sure they have the stock.
Right.
And they've got to fight over the customers. And it's changed a lot since then because of, DTC, and so much of Nike and a lot of these businesses are direct now. But at the time, DTC wasn't huge. And the music partners of the time weren't doing a great job of branding themselves. So it became our mission as a retailer to it was born out of a total strategic necessity of we have to mint guitar players. And a lot of credit goes to our CEO at the time, Marty Albertson, because he was born in the industry and started as an accessory manager in San Francisco and ended up being our CEO, and he's brilliant. But he just said, hey, we've got to create musicians. And that's what the brand work at Guitar Center was born out of. Now Fender is phenomenal. The work that Fender's doing is absolutely incredible, and a lot of brands are figuring that out. And you can see all the work that we did years ago still within the industry, because it's they realize that if they want to be successful, consumers have to have a passion for their brand. So
sure.
When I went to the brand side at Ernie Ball, we were still a little ahead of this curve, and because they had such an amazing roster, we were able to. That's when I created my second project with DirecTV, which was The Pursuit of Tone, which became a full-length documentary series. It was nobody was doing it, and retail and MI still not doing it, and I think it's a miss. But luckily, the brands are doing such a great job. Gibson's doing a great job as well. That I think then the retailers are allowed to focus on some of the other consumer differentiation points. Ease of shopping experience, financing, selection, education. I mean, they do a lot of the retail partners in the MI space do an awesome job of that. But I think I think brand really matters, and especially in the MI space. And so we were lucky in that front. And that's how we were able to build such a massive lead in the connectivity space when we were at Guitar Center. I mean, the YouTube audience was massive, and we really leveraged that tool pretty effectively.
Nice. So, I mean, even then, social media was still a part of your distribution plan. Because I noticed, with DirecTV and AT&T being such big names, those obviously are going to be televised or docuseries style events. But, you were doing all of this at the time, to your point, that social media was kind of coming online.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Well, yeah. And then by in the mid 2010s, it was, it was absolutely dominant. We had, we did a lot for YouTube. DirecTV gave us a massive distribution footprint with 200 plus million subscribers and eyeballs, and then when they merged with AT&T, that even became bigger, and it gave us budget. They would write big checks to allow us to realize our ideas. And when you're in a retail company, the last thing that a CEO wants to do is he's trying to drive strong EBITDA and sales growth, and he's got a bunch of kids with piercings and tattoos trying to convince him to do TV shows, and he's just like, what's the ROI on this? And so we had to work with our agency, and we developed a methodology that proved why content was valuable, and but still the budgets that the networks would provide would be massive. Now a lot of those budgets aren't there anymore.
Sure.
because the content space has been absolutely democratized. And in a way, a lot of these platforms are competing for content producers. And so, but the TV show was just one thing. I mean, we had
Sure.
we did 20 episodes a year, but we had the web series. We had so much product. I mean, we were publishing a couple thousand videos a year.
Wow.
At our height, we had a fully in-house production crew, and multiple edit bays. And I still work with a lot of those guys today. They've all grown up and have their own companies, and they're doing phenomenal work for mega brands. And I still call them and twist their arm about budgets, and we still do some fun projects together. But social media was always a really big piece of our ability to connect. And when you're working with A-level artists or any type of artist, those were what are now the modern day influencers. You do something with Metallica, you've got a built-in audience of 50 million people.
Right.
That are going to like instantly come to your content. So it grew our audience rapidly. It's a little more challenging to do when you're trying to define an audience and find an audience. I mean,
absolutely.
So.
Yeah. And I think that was one of the things too, when I was looking at what you've done in Guitar Center is, you talk about content strategy, producing these content series, and then managing the strategy of the relationship with the artist. I mean, that is what the social standard does today. Right? But for a wide variety of brands, and obviously focused really on social. So to me, it's interesting to see how brands did this like 20 years ago versus now, because what I constantly tell people is that we are not doing anything different in advertising. It's just a different methodology. We can apply the same strategies, and all the stuff that worked 20 years ago will work now. You just have to tune it and dress it up a little bit for social media.
Absolutely. Great storytelling. Strong great creative, and a connectivity strategy. 15 years ago it was television and radio. Today it's Instagram, TikTok, and using influence. But it's no different. I mean, an influencer today was what Led Zeppelin was in the 70s.
Exactly.
I'm not quite that old, but same idea. And I think what changes though is what's important to that influencer and that artist, right? With artists, over time was, when we were working with a lot of those artists back then, and it's still true today, even though the ability to monetize the business is a lot more broad, but they were struggling. Nobody was making money selling records. Record companies were trying to figure out their new model. They were finding ways to monetize things. So what we had to do was structure our deals in a way that were very artist forward. We let the artists in a lot of ways own their content. Like, great example is one of my first documentaries I did was Slash. It's still on Amazon. And people they'll take pictures of it and they'll text me like, "Hey, do you get paid for this?" I'm like, "Fuck no, I'm not getting paid for this." Like Slash is getting paid for this. But what that was the deal. Like, and like I love Slash, and Jeff Arner, his manager, he's one of my great friends. Like that was the trade. Like,
sure.
Give us a window of exclusivity to tell this cool story. We'll pay for all of this, and at the end of that window, we're going to give this to you, and then you're going to be able to take this and monetize it. Because at the end of the day, that's the trade. We've got to find a way to have artists in whatever realm they're in, whether they're surfers, skaters, which is a lot of what I deal with now, musicians, whatever their pursuits are. We have to find a way to help them generate a revenue stream and continue to be curators of what's coming. Because if we don't make sure that they're incentivized and financially rewarded for their incredible efforts, then we're not going to have people to help us tell stories. So that's something. So as things go on, those are the things that we try to figure out, like what's important to a specific individual that we're trying to work with, and make sure that they feel like this is a mutually beneficial partnership.
Yeah, I think that's really smart. That's actually back 7-8 years ago when I was starting the social standard, it was the same thing. It was like brands and influencers were just butting heads, trying to who can get the most out of each other. And he said, "Hey guys, come on, we can work together. It can be a long-term relationship. Like, this is the way to do it. It's better for everyone when you do it this way." But it's interesting that you guys do that, where you're basically saying, "Hey, we'll pay to produce the content. We have the exclusivity window here, and then it's yours to monetize." I wonder if something like that will end up transpiring in the influencer world as it is now, because right now brands want to own everything outright in perpetuity, which I think makes sense from a business and convenience standpoint, given the amount of content that is floating around out there. But I mean, as more and more creators become businesses themselves, it almost makes sense to me that the model that you're talking about is going to be what is the way of the future.
I think it just depends on the budget. Like I find myself in this situation all the time where I'm like, look, I got to own it. Right. But I know that I got to pay for that.
Right.
But it depends on who it's with. I mean, if we're hiring, if you're working with Metallica, they're going to own the work. I mean, that's just the way it's going to be.
There's not a lot of leverage you're going to have, right?
Right. You've got to I mean, our pilot episode was with Peter Gabriel, and the deal we did with Peter Gabriel was different than anybody we would deal with because he's Peter Gabriel, and you're just like, what's the value trade? So, I find that a lot of times, my advice that I give to a lot of the great people on our team and, other, colleagues is, just don't get caught up in the concept of the deal point, right? Oftentimes the thing that you're making is going to be obsolete in a year. So who gives a shit? Who gives a shit who fucking owns it a year from now? Like
100%.
Not going to be, you're not going to use it. So it's like, I remember when I was a kid in a band fighting over songwriting titles or credits. And I'm like, guys, what am I fighting over? You're fighting over that. You're worried about the wrong thing. I think that, obviously one, you've got to be smart. You got to manage your IP. You got to make sure you don't get yourself into a deal where somebody you're licensing your marks in a way that's going to compromise you in the future. But at the same time, be realistic about how long this thing's going to live. And you're going to run a campaign for maybe 6 months. If you're lucky, you'll squeeze a year out of it. And after that, it's going to go on a hard drive somewhere, and you're never going to see it again. And I think that you got to manage these relationships with people in a way that are forever. Because whether you're working at Guitar Center, Ernie Ball, or Firestone, these are a lot of relationships follow you wherever you go. I mean, our partnership with Connor Coffin, who's a phenomenal human being, pro surfer, number 4 on the world tour. Connor and I go back to my music days when I was at Ernie Ball, and we worked because he was a great musician. And when I got to Firestone, he just called one day and he said, "Hey, I've got a beer company that wants to sign me, and I'd really love to work with you guys. And I think the storytelling that you're doing is so important and exciting. I'd really love to work with you if you'd love to work with me." And I was like, yeah, no, he lives in Santa Barbara. He's from the 805. I'm like, Perfect. It's a no-brainer, but I can't pay you what Big Beer can pay you. And he said, it's not about the money. It's, it's really about doing work that's important to me. And like, that's when, all the synapses in your brain need to fire and you go, okay, this is the perfect partnership. That's who you want to work with. Because, I'm not interested in short-term gain for like a high-level, super expensive partnership that isn't going to have legs, a year or two from now. Sure. So that's a great example of just how relationships have transcended over the years, and always making sure we do the right thing. Yeah, no, I think it's important. I mean, the long-term strategy is sort of the best and only strategy, I think, in most instances here. So it makes a lot of sense. And that brings me to kind of the transition from your music to the beer space, which some may say, how does this pencil? But actually, I think it makes a ton of sense because from what we've seen, especially, first of all, California culture does not stay in California, right? It just constantly sweeps over the United States. So I think you guys are sitting in a nice position from that. Do people care as much about what's going on in Delaware? Probably not, right? But California is it's an exportable commodity for sure. It is. That's a great way to put it. It's an exportable commodity, and everybody wants to be part of it. So I totally get that. But the other thing too is, when you talk about like passion and culture, and really bringing together things, it's not just beer, right? You talk about your partnership with Connor or your partnership with Drew Smith, right? All of these incredible photographers, outdoor enthusiasts, surfers, skaters, all of these guys kind of coming together and then pulling in the music aspect. It's like your brand needs to be at the epicenter of these passion and these cultural movements in order to be relevant. And so to me, the beer industry, especially, I don't want to call you guys a smaller brand, but you're not part of to your point, you're not part of the big beer conglomerates either, but like an independent company, it's like, this is where you make your mark, right? It's almost like the way that you have set up the marketing there is as if you guys just started yesterday. And you started because there were a bunch of cool people doing a bunch of cool things, and it just sort of grassroots takes off, right? And that to me is the vibe that I get when I look at a lot of the work that you guys have done at Firestone so far. So to me, it makes a ton of sense. And I think we're seeing a lot of this happen across the board. And I think that's where a lot of these direct-to-consumer businesses
also have seen success because they're no longer looking at P&G or Budweiser or, Walmart. They're up and coming brands that have true personalities, right? It's kind of like the focus has come back to the brand and the personality. I mean, would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I think so. The world has just been so democratized with social media that you can, and you don't have, and with the way that supply chain was working,
Sure.
we'll see what happens as things get cleaned up over the next couple months. But
Yep.
you don't have to, because you can run these online businesses, you can keep your overhead incredibly low. You don't have to do you don't have to do the scale and volume to have a nice little business. And there's a lot of people that are really happy with a small to mid-sized business. They can provide for their employees. They can be creative. They can carve out a nice piece of business, and you don't have to be a $1 billion brand.
Right.
There's all these, customers and consumers are always looking for something different, right? And I think that that's a big piece of what we've always really focused on in the storytelling space. Yeah, beer for me was definitely like when I met David Walker and he was talking to me about what he was looking for, and I was like, well, I'm familiar with the brand. Obviously 805 was, I inherited an amazing brand. I mean, like 805 was an absolute is a rock star in the beer space in California. And so again, when I met David, I'm always drawn to founders, and they're just inspirational,
Sure.
Aspirational people. And, I feel like I grind at a pretty high level, and I take some pretty crazy risks, but I have not ever found myself in the same rare era of like some of these founders that are willing to put their entire livelihoods on the line to build these things and not make money for like a decade.
Yeah.
So when I met David, I was like, hey, I think this sounds like a cool partnership, and I like what you've got here, but I don't know what you see in a guy like me. Like I'm a music business rat. Like how am I going to sell beer? And he's like, I don't want somebody from the business. I want somebody. I think that this is a lifestyle brand, and I want somebody that thinks differently, that doesn't have the dogma of the space. And so we came in and got to work, and it's been about 2.5 years now, and. So, taking the raw materials of the brand, when David and Adam, the founder story, check, 805 lifestyle pursuits born out of the Central Coast, salt to the earth work ethic, and, their whole mantra of beer before glory, which is about, make great beer before anything else, before the profits, before the acclaim. It's not about the awards. It's about getting up every day. And these guys feel like beer like I felt about music when I was 14 years old. And like, so it's like all they wanted to do. It consumed them, especially Matt Brindelson. So, and David to this day, still is consumed with the industry, and he's so passionate about what he does. And so anytime that you can tap into passion, no matter the frequency, it's still something that like resonates within me. And I became passionate about beer. And then you learn all the angles of the business, and it's like, sure. Okay, cool. This is how I used to do it. How can I apply a lot of my experience and methodologies to this? And so I'm glad that you think that it feels different, because I think that's really the goal. Here's the biggest difference between beer and music. 9,000 craft brewers in the U.S. Think of that. Think of that amount of competition. And then 5 of them are like $50 billion brands. So when you think about how big that industry is, and how much competition there is, and how many more consumers there are, percentage of humans that drink versus percentage of humans that play guitar, it completely was a paradigm shift of like, how do you operate in this space, and
sure,
and what connects consumers. So the biggest mantra that we have, and then I preach to the team, is like, how are we have to be defiantly unconventional. We have to stand out in a sea of sameness. We got to do things differently, because as Firestone Walker is a regionally powerful craft brewer.
Sure.
We're not competing with Budweiser. We're not competing with Modelo. That's like a whole nother league. What we have to do is we have to compete for the consumers who want something different. And I think that as long as we provide an amazing outlet for consumers who see themselves like us as defiantly unconventional and different, then I think we're gonna we'll have a brand that David and his kids and Adam's kids, because we're a second generation company now. Tamsin, David's daughter, is a brand manager for us on one of our products, and Adam's son Nick, runs a huge portion of the operations side of our business. And everything that we do, and this is what's really cool about being in these industries, is there's this extra layer of responsibility, because you're not just managing a P&L, you're managing a legacy.
Sure.
And like, sure. I gotta give this thing back in better shape than it was given to me. And every decision matters. Like, if you mitigate your risk a little bit, because you're like, am I gonna like fuck up the Firestone Walker brand for these guys? Like, I don't want to. Their names are on the building. I don't want to blow it. So
right.
It's fun. It's exciting, and it's rewarding, because what's really rewarding to me is when I sit down with David or Adam, sure. and you see the appreciation or pride in the work, regardless of how great the numbers are. I mean, if you have a stellar year, that's awesome, and that puts you in a position to improve people's lives. But at the end of the day, like, have we made David and Adam proud, I think is an exciting piece of this. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, do you have plans of doing maybe like a documentary, Netflix, Hulu, YouTube style series it seems like you guys are ripe for that. And I mean, given just how the society likes to consume content, it seems like a pretty reasonable next step. Yeah, I thought about that a lot when I met them, because they're hilarious. I mean, these two guys together, like The Lion and the Bear, it's all about this tension. Yeah. They have this crazy tension. I mean, David's this like artisan, well-spoken, artistic Brit, and then Adam's like a hard-charging, no-nonsense Californian, military guy and former military lawyer. And they're both brilliant, and their tension and they're healthy, hilarious. They're brothers-in-law, right? So and you would think that, but they are allergic to the limelight. They don't want to be. They don't want it to be about them. They want it to be about the beer. So as a marketer, you're like, hey, wow, wouldn't this be incredible? Sure. And they're just like, they shy away from it. I mean, we'll do a Christmas video. They love that we do a Christmas video every year. That's fun. And but we'll make films like the Brewing for Tomorrow film, which feature them. They'll like all day long, they'll get in front of a camera and talk about the brewery, sure, and talk about the art. But about themselves, not so much. And that's so admirable in this business. Yeah. It makes sense. I was even thinking more along the lines of like what you did with Drew Smith. And Connor and those guys, just less about putting Firestone at the forefront and more about, to your point, the content and the storytelling and how Firestone is part of that, Yeah, you're right. And it's something that we'll continue to chip away at the guys on and find the right moments. But Firestone, there's just really an embarrassment of riches, right? There's so many opportunities to talk about the products and the brands, and it's a great exercise for me to do different. Sure. I always like, a certain point in your career, sometimes as a creative, you go like, you kind of feel like you topped out. You're like, okay, I could do more of the same. Like, I'm pretty good at this thing and I could keep doing this thing. But, if you're anything like, a lot of us are like, with this crazy imposter syndrome that we all seem to have am I good at this, or what's the next thing? Or is this innovative anymore? I mean, I think that's the other thing that pushes a lot of us is like, we want to just constantly do different. We want to try to innovate into a new space. And so the opportunity to do different, with Firestone, was really appealing, and it ended up being, I think, one of the best decisions I've made in my career. I love who I work for, and absolutely. And I love the team, and I love the challenge of, just really sort of overwhelming competition of like, wow, I mean, we got to get up and go to battle every day with people and brands who have budgets bigger than our total sales volume. So yeah, makes sense. I'm not sure I answered your question. The thing. Well, yes and no. I mean, it wasn't a question I had assumed would be answered. Just, you're not going to give out your whole marketing strategy right here, are you? But I think one of the things that came to mind when I was looking at some of the content that you'd produced at Firestone, which is all really amazing stuff, was it's very long. Yes. How do you, and I think that's probably a big challenge for you specifically, given all the long form stuff that you've done, is like, how do you make that relevant to a younger audience whose attention span is kind of in that 2-minute maximum? When people are either doing
15-second to 2-minute bites of content, or just to use a popular example, like a Joe Rogan, hour and a half to 2 hours amount of content. Now, those are two different audiences, right? I don't know if TikTokers are listening to Joe Rogan, but you get the concept of that. And to me, that's a big challenge, right? If you're going to create the 15-minute piece of content, how do you get people to really watch it?
It's a great question. And you know what? It's not a new argument, right? I remember, this was like when Instagram first launched. Remember when Instagram was like only 15 seconds? And
yes.
It was like, this was, and when was that, 10 years ago? It feels like that was like, yeah. It feels like a lifetime ago. I've been having this argument from the beginning of time, from like the beginning of from social media. Cause it's so crazy to think I'm not that old. I'm going to be 42, but I started so young that I remember the launch of, social media platforms and how we did content. And, I have this sort of weird old salty vet view of like, when people say, how long should it be? I say it's as long as it is good.
Yeah, 100%.
Make it great. Because, you can make the argument for every piece of content. You can go to YouTube and you can find 35-minute long makeup tutorials that have 10 million, 30 million views, right? You have to create the content. It depends on what you're trying to do. If you're telling a story, for me, story is long form.
Sure. And
that's destination viewing. I don't want so we've had a couple of really amazing long form films in the works for next year. A full length documentary with Tyler Berryman, one of our professional motorcycle riders. We've got a film in the works with Connor and Keith Malloy that's going to be great. And those are destination viewing. I want someone to watch those on a larger screen. So that's going to be probably a YouTube strategy.
Okay.
And that's, hey, drive people, create energy, drive people to destination viewing. That could be theater releases. That's YouTube. That's over the top. And that's where I want people to sit down, turn the lights off, try to put their phone down, and watch a piece of content that's going to inspire them and tell them a story. And then you got all the crazy snackable stuff, right? New beer, new product, 15 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute. We mine all of the content for, we'll take an hour-long film and there could be 150 pieces of content that come out of that film, or we'll intentionally go into it to, hey, let's make something short. And we work with such a vast stable of creators. We'll go into that project with a specific ask, like this is where it's going to go, so this is what it needs to be. But again, as a storyteller at heart, I wouldn't say that I'm even a marketer. Marketing is just a skill I learned.
Sure.
I think that you don't be afraid of making long content. I think there's, Rogan's a phenomenal example, 4-hour podcast,
right.
And luckily I have a long drive between the two breweries, so I can get a lot of those in, but then he takes, a 6-minute clip and he puts it on YouTube, or he takes a couple-minute clip and it goes on all the different platforms. I think that's going to be the key, is weaponize each one of those verticals and create the content for those verticals. The TikTok user isn't going to TikTok to watch a film. They want, a clever or informative, digestible piece of content. And then, and I think that's where the media strategy comes in, and we push that stuff out to the right people at the right time, and ultimately create an ecosystem of, each brand. Your brand is a network, and within that network you have different channels. And if you want to be amused, or if you want just super short digestible stuff, go here. If you want to sit down and really immerse yourself in new engaging stories, then there's other channels for that. And I think that's the beauty of the industry, is that you don't need a lot of these big networks anymore. And I think that's why a lot of them are so, rapidly either acquiring or doing their plus. What's funny is they always said with the new streaming model, like it's going to be way cheaper. I think I spend more money with every single app that I have to buy, and I still have DirecTV because it's the only way I can watch F1. But the landscape is incredible, and so I think that to answer your long answer to your question, it's as good as it's as long as it is good on the right platform.
Yeah, I think that strategy makes the most sense. That's a strategy that survives the times, right? And I think it makes a lot of sense. I was just curious because I went to your YouTube and your Instagram. Obviously, I'm going to do that. And I just didn't see as much as I thought I would, especially on Instagram.
As much content?
Yeah, exactly. I didn't see a ton of the stuff that you guys had done that was long form, that was snackable, that I think would get interest going up.
Yeah.
to the longer form stuff?
Yeah, I think a big, again, we're still early days at Firestone. I mean, 2.5 years,
Sure.
rebrand, build a new team.
Totally. Yeah, and that's not a knock. It was just more of a, I was a little surprised to see it because you guys have such amazing content.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I bang on the team about it a lot. And it's something that, there's an art to it. And it's getting people, the teams used to the idea that like, okay, we made this awesome piece. How are we going to pull all the pieces? And then what's the right cadence? How often do you do it? I mean, the thing about organic reach too, and I think this is also something that's really important. I think people get way too consumed with their social media feed and the organic reach. Listen, these guys have clawed this thing back to like 0.00001% organic reach. Like the amount of wasted energy on I talk to the team about this all the time. Like, stop arguing about the organic feed. What's the paid strategy? Right. What's the promoted strategy? Like, that's the calendar that matters. And because the Instagram, people get consumed about it because it's in your hand and it's like this dopamine hit of like, I'm gonna look at how cool my feed looks. And it's here's the thing that I'd keep in mind. Like, think about it's so different in beer too, right? We sell millions of cases of beer. But we have 75,000 Instagram followers for 805, right? Firestone Walker's got 250,000. These are relatively small numbers in the scheme of, of the world. But when you look at beer overall, there's not a lot of consumers don't engage with beer brands the same way they maybe engage with like surf brands or skate brands. And so what we're working on is making sure that we create a brand that people do want to really engage with, and I think that and that not meaning the brand itself, but the experience of the brand, and so a lot of the new content and a lot of the new stuff that's the guys are working on right now is, keep in mind, shoot stuff 6-8 months ago that's going to come out in 3 to 4 months. I mean, the lead times are huge these days, but that's a big piece of it, is understanding how it's different for every brand. I mean, Red Bull is the master at the beverage bit. I mean, there's nobody better than Red Bull in beverage. Regardless of alcohol or non-alc. I mean, because it's never about the product. Right. Unless the only time it's ever about the product is when you walk into the liquor store and there's a sticker on the wall that says, now available in 3 new flavors. But you never see that anywhere else. So, I mean, that's a good model. Vans too. So.
Yeah, no, those guys do a great. We actually just hired somebody from Red Bull on the content side. So
nice, me too.
Yeah, I think everybody is at the present.
Don't go to college, get a job at Red Bull, and then we'll
100%.
We'll hire you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think about that all the time. It's like, there's no way at this pace that I'm going to encourage my children to go to college. Just won't do it.
No, you know what? And some of the most talented people on my team, they didn't go to college for what they do now.
Go out, get that 4 years of experience, learning something you're actually going to do. I think it's way better. I
give talks at schools every once in a while, and I think that the reason they like me so much is I just make it seem attainable, because like, look at me, like. And
they've already got the students, right? The students are probably not going to drop out just because of one conversation.
If this knucklehead can do it, you can do it too.
Oh, that's funny. I had a professor once actually that said, he said, you don't have to be that smart to do it. You just have to be dumb enough to want to do it. It's like, I think that's probably spot on for most things.
You have to have, and again, everybody that works on our team now has this, and, it's what I look for in every person we hire, whether it be, I've interviewed, a handful of like our experiential marketing, as we're building up our experiential marketing team. I want to meet all the kids that adults that we hire. But the thing that I look for in all of them is passion. Like, what do you want to do in life? Because like, if you're just thinking about your next vacation, if you're just thinking about like, if you're not all in on wanting to contribute to something bigger, if you're not interested in wanting to be part of a team and create something and make your mark in this world, then it's probably not the place for you. And because it's like, I get up every day with this like crazy desire to want to make something, and we live our industry. So I mean, I could, if I'm looking at Instagram, watching TV, I'm walking, down the street, and I'm like, everything is competition to me, and I see something, I'm like, fuck, wish I did that, or like, look at how great that is, or
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's the most important thing. If I can meet people that are passionate and have a crazy work ethic, I can almost teach you everything else. So at least the stuff that I know, or hey, there's enough people on the team because we hire people that are way smarter than me. They're going to help. They're going to help teach you something. And at this point in our careers, when you get a little older, you realize it's not just about being an individual contributor. It's about how do I help foster the next generation of creators and give people the runway that I was so lucky to have when I was a kid. I had CMOs that like just left me alone and let me be me and let me fail fast and kept me from getting fired when I made a stupid decision. And I think that's some of the most important. We can't be you can't be afraid to fail. You got to be really willing to fail fast. You learn more from failing than you do winning.
Oh, 100%. There's no question. I think anyone who's ever built anything worthwhile knows that. So that's great. Well, I mean, I'm excited to hear you guys are getting into some of the experiential stuff because I think that makes a lot of sense. We just launched an experiential division even here. And I think as you were talking about some of the films and things you guys are going, I mean, I think it would be killer for you guys to do some experiences where you do launch parties and like actually get to live and breathe the lifestyle of Firestone for a hot second. I think, get some influencers there, do some things.
100%. Well, COVID just gave us there was from a business perspective, some of the silver lining of COVID, in a way, allowed you to eliminate sort of your legacy thinking, right? Like, slay a lot of sacred cows.
Yep.
The absolutely. Things that we thought, okay, well, we weren't allowed to do a lot of those things, and the business didn't, particularly suffer from not doing those things. So like when it comes back, it's like, well, you don't go back to pre-COVID thinking. Right. Experiential is a big one for us. I mean, I went out and, found this amazing, talent from, we're from Red Bull, and she runs our Experiential now, and she's building a phenomenal team on top of the team that we have. But 100% the connectivity between the organization, I mean, that's a big focus for us, is the cross functionality of, okay, if this is our strategy with Connor, what's the content strategy? What's the media strategy? What's the experiential? Like, if we're going to make a film, what's the film release strategy? Are we going and doing a bunch of release parties? We've got these 3 amazing temples to the brand with our tap rooms. What are we? How are we bringing people to those to experience the world of Firestone? So experiential is absolutely crucial to developing the connection points between you and your customers. For us, and for I think a lot of brands, it's like, how do you tie it to the bigger story? Because too easily it can get fragmented. When you've got, you got 5 great marketing directors, and like we do here on my team, it's like, and they're killers. And if they all have to be, though, going in the same direction, and if they do that, then the force multiplier effect is huge. So, but it's how you do it in a new world. And I think that, to me, experiential is all about, experiential just isn't popping up a tent and handing out beers. I think it's about, I want all those kids. And they are kids, because most people doing that job, they're early 20s. They're passionate about the surf, skate, moto scene. They all actively participate. They've got the toughest jobs in the world, working weekends and long hours and driving and in the heat. So we want to encourage an environment where they get to participate in what they love, but also train them up to be content creators. I mean, these guys need to be the ultimate content creators, because they're on the front lines dealing with working with our athletes, and they're working with the type of consumers that we resonate with. So it's like, I think that's the difference, is like investing in them to invest back in us, and then ultimately creates great careers for them. But experiential is a huge focus for the future, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the state of COVID in the world, and how this new variant factors in.
Sure, absolutely. I think that's a question everyone would like to know the answer to.
Yeah.
Good deal. Well, hey, I've got one final question for you.
Sure.
Just, since we're an influencer marketing company, I got to ask you, who is one influencer who's had a big impact on your life? Doesn't have to be a blogger, could be a musician, anyone who we have a very loose definition of influencer over here.
No, I have a good answer for this, and it's going to date me a little. It's going to date me a little bit, but
okay. All right. We'll be ready for it.
But and it's actually a really cool story, because if you have a minute for me to tell the story,
please.
But when I was 14 years old, the first concert I ever saw at the Palladium in Hollywood was this band called Blink, opening for this band called The Vandals, and then opening for NoFX.
Okay.
And like some of the most iconic punk rock bands. And
Absolutely.
I got into punk really early on, and I remember seeing this band Blink, and I think I don't even know if they had 182 at the time. It was just
really?
Blink. I think it was before they had the 182. It was really, really early, 94, I think. So made me want to play guitar. Like that next day I was like, I need a guitar. Like I want to play guitar. Wow. This is what I want to do. And fast forward, I'm at Guitar Center. We're doing stuff here and there with the band, and and then over time I forged a relationship with Tom, who's the guitar player in Blink, and his sister, who manages his company, and he's got great management. And we did a lot of projects over the years, but a couple years ago, when I had the idea for The Pursuit of Tone, Tom was going through sort of the breakup of Blink-182, and we were really persistent about like trying to tell his story. I'm like, this is such a cool story to tell. The director on the project had done a Blink-182 documentary that got shelved because they didn't want to release it, who was a long time, still a long time collaborative partner of mine. And we got Tom to agree to make this documentary. And it's called The Pursuit of Tone, and it's with Tom. And I remember, making the film was obviously there was a lot of pressure because you're like, shit, this guy's the reason I want to play guitar. And I don't want to what if we fuck his story up? Like, geez, he'll hate us. And then, we ended up making this really amazing film about his life. And I remember being at the London releasing for the premiere, and, he walked up to us, and, he's just like, I remember he like grabbed us and he was like, hey, my wife says she finally understands me. And we're like, whoa.
Oh, man.
It's kind of cool.
That might be the biggest compliment ever. Gee.
So, and then, I bumped into him, we did another project after that. And then he was like, this film has just been so important to me. And I remember like, it's kind of crazy, but like after, I've made a lot of shit in my life. Like I've made a lot of content.
Sure.
And with artists that you would think I'd be excited about, with artists that I didn't think I was going to be excited about, ended up being an amazing experience. A lot of great experiences, a lot of hilarious experiences with really difficult artists. But like after that film came out, like it literally scratched an itch that like I had for 20 years. And like after that, it was like, okay, a lot of the pressure came off, and I didn't feel like I had to prove myself anymore. And now it's like, I just want to make great work, and I want people to be proud of it. To this day, I mean, like Tom is an artist, I think he's sort of like, he's the pinnacle of, he's writes books, he makes films, he's, discovering aliens. I mean, he's like a super misunderstood guy who's actually proved out a lot of really interesting stuff, but making that film and getting a peek inside of his life and getting to give back to the person who got me started on this whole journey is something I've never told him. And so this is the only time I've really told the story publicly. We'll send
him this podcast.
I've never told him. His sister knows the story, but that's like, I think that to be in the position to be able to give back and to make art with the people that inspired you to make art, and hopefully I'll inspire somebody through the work that me and the incredible cast of creative people that I get to work with. If I inspire somebody to make something, then at the end of the day, I think I've done my job, and I can check a box of like that my time here on Earth was somewhat meaningful. So that's the story of
That's probably the best answer to the question we've ever received on this podcast. So
well, there you go.
Yeah, I think we're going to close it on that before I screw it up. So
awesome. Well, I appreciate you having me. Big fan of what you do.
Thanks.
And really, again, great conversation. Thanks for asking some really meaningful questions. Got me thinking. So hopefully I didn't reveal any of the secret sauce and get in trouble. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you can edit that out later. But hey, it was awesome. Great. It was great to have you. I appreciate the conversation, and we should do it again soon.
You got it. Thanks, Jess.
Thanks.
See ya.